I stood there with my box of belongings, watching the office lights glare far too brightly above me, realizing the company I had given 16 years to had just erased me in front of everyone, as if none of it mattered anymore. And, as security hovered near the door, I thought about the nights I had driven through storms to meet clients, the anniversaries missed, the weekends spent answering calls from people who trusted me to keep promises. This company never could without my name attached. To them, my boss spoke about restructuring like it was some force of nature beyond his control. But I felt something settle inside my chest that was not anger exactly, rather a kind of sharp clarity you only get when watching people burn bridges they do not even know they are standing on. As I walked past the desks where my team looked down at their keyboards, because nobody wants to see loyalty thrown away like old furniture, I understood this was not the ending they believed it to be. Because contracts do not care about ambition, clients do not care about titles, and the law does not care about anyone's story except the one written in signatures, dates, and clauses that turn arrogance into obligations. When the elevator doors closed, I already knew the humiliation stamped across this day would not last nearly as long as the consequences quietly waiting on the other side of it. When I reached the parking lot, the evening air felt heavier than I expected, like the city itself knew something irreversible had just happened. And I stood beside my truck for a long moment, realizing I had crossed a line I never imagined leaving. Behind so suddenly after so many years, building something I thought would always carry my name somewhere inside it. 16 years ago, I started with nothing except a briefcase, a used laptop, and a list of numbers scratched on paper from construction site managers who barely remembered meeting me. But I called every single one until they knew my voice before I even said my name. I remembered nights driving across state lines with contracts in my passenger seat because deadlines could not wait for morning. Remembered holding a flashlight for engineers at midnight while they fixed equipment nobody else would come near until sunrise. Remembered 1,000 small moments when clients saw me standing there ready to handle whatever had gone wrong, because I never once told them it was someone else's problem. That company lived on those promises, breathed because people like me gave it lungs. But the man who called me an expensive burden today never saw those nights or those faces, never understood how many deals were signed because someone trusted me. Personally, not the name painted on the office wall. He believed numbers on spreadsheets told the whole story, believed cutting salaries created strength instead of silence, believed ambition always outruns experience as if history itself has not spent centuries proving otherwise every time arrogance replaces memory. As I drove home, the skyline flashing through my windshield, I kept thinking about the list waiting in my desk drawer, the one holding renewal dates, client preferences, quiet details gathered over decades that turned contracts into relationships. The same list my boss ignored because he thought loyalty stayed stapled to paperwork instead of people. By the time I reached my driveway, the humiliation from that conference room felt like something distant already, because humiliation only burns when you believe it erased everything you built. But I knew better. New foundations do not crumble just because someone hangs a new sign above the door. I carried the box inside, set it on the kitchen table beside bills and birthday cards. Ordinary life stacked against the pieces of a career ending in silence. And as I looked at my daughter's photograph tucked between old client folders, I felt the anger fade into something calmer, colder, heavier than rage, because rage wants to shout while clarity just writes dates on calendars, calls lawyers, reads contracts aloud line by line until signatures turn pride into liability. And that was when I knew Friday would not arrive before the first cracks showed beneath everything they thought would hold without me standing there. The next morning, I woke before sunrise because sleep refused to stay long enough for dreams. And I sat at the kitchen table with coffee gone cold before I even drank half the cup, staring at the stack of folders pulled from my old office before security locked the door behind me yesterday afternoon. Inside those folders lived the history of every account I ever managed. Every contract signed because someone trusted my word more than a slogan printed on letterhead. And as I flipped through pages covered with renewal dates and handwritten notes about birthdays, anniversaries, and children graduating college, I realized the company thought it owned this history when it never truly belonged to them at all. Relationships do not transfer with job titles or company logos, because trust does not survive on spreadsheets where my former boss lives counting dollars like heartbeats without realizing the patient has already left the room entirely. He believed clients stayed because of products, pricing, and branding campaigns written by people who never shook a hand at midnight when shipments stalled in the middle of winter storms. But I knew better because my phone kept buzzing yesterday. Evening long after I drove home, carrying that cardboard box filled with the pieces of my career they thought ended inside one meeting room. Clients called asking why nobody warned them before replacing the man who handled their contracts like they carried blood instead of ink. Asking whether stability still existed inside a company where loyalty fell under budget cuts during quarterly reviews. I told them nothing beyond the truth printed on paper because silence holds more weight than speeches when people already feel betrayal growing beneath their feet. And by midnight, several promised to delay renewals until someone explained why. Experience left the building carrying 16 years of trust inside one cardboard box. This morning, I listed every message with timestamps because evidence grows strongest when built slowly, carefully, without anger to crack its foundation before courts read dates louder than memories ever speak. My attorney answered before the second ring when I called her office, listened while I read clauses from the contract my former boss signed 3 years ago without imagining the words would someday cost him far more than my salary ever did. And when I finished reading, she told me to scan every document, every voicemail transcription, every email carrying hesitation from clients now refusing signatures until leadership explained why ambition replaced loyalty overnight. I agreed because the law does not punish emotion, but it loves paper-carrying dates, signatures, and silence broken only when judges order someone to speak under oath about decisions made too quickly in rooms where arrogance left windows open for consequences to climb through later carrying lawsuits written with ink darker than pride can survive. By midweek, the silence inside their building began spreading faster than any rumor could travel because clients delayed calls, partners postponed meetings, and department heads started whispering about revenue slipping through cracks nobody admitted existed until my absence turned those cracks into open doors swinging wider each day. My phone stayed busy without me dialing a single number because hesitation grows louder when leadership offers nothing but scripted reassurances. Nobody trusts after watching someone escorted out carrying 16 years of history inside a single cardboard box. One client told me the new account manager could not answer basic questions about contract terms signed years earlier because those terms lived inside memories built through conversations, late nights, and personal favors spreadsheets never record. And I wrote everything down because patterns matter when lawyers read transcripts searching for cause and effect spelled clearly enough for judges to follow without asking twice. Another client forwarded an internal email accidentally copied to them where executives debated whether losing 1 or 2 accounts might be acceptable. Collateral damage for proving cost-cutting created efficiency. Shareholders would celebrate next quarter, and I saved that message immediately because nothing supports breach of contract claims better than arrogance written in permanent ink across company servers. My attorney scheduled a meeting for Friday afternoon, promising to draft formal notice before Monday morning. Because contracts carry timelines, courts respect more than excuses delivered after signatures dry above titles. People lose once settlements. Replace ambition with obligations signed under pressure leadership never expects until evidence corners them too tightly for negotiation to breathe anymore. I slept little each night because my mind kept arranging documents into sequences judges could follow like maps leading from boardroom arrogance to courtroom consequences without missing one detail along the trail, proving cause, effect, and damages. Measurable in dollars ambition forgot to count before replacing loyalty with interns holding clipboards where experience used to stand. By Thursday evening, 3 major accounts requested written clarification about leadership changes before signing anything beyond temporary extensions, lasting only until stability returned because they preferred contracts with people rather than companies willing to discard relationships like office furniture replaced during budget reviews. Nobody explains until silence answers questions louder than corporate press releases promising innovation. Clients stop believing once trust disappears completely. My attorney said hesitation documented across emails, transcripts, and renewal delays creates leverage, settlements, respect faster than lawsuits because shareholders hate publicity, dragging quarterly reports through headlines louder than earnings. Calls executives rehearse carefully while lawyers file motions quietly behind courthouse doors. Judges open before journalists find copies waiting under fluorescent lights. Reporters love more than profits slipping quietly through hands. Leadership. Thought controlled everything until evidence proves otherwise. I agreed because patience weighs more than anger when contracts carry deadlines. Ambition forgets exist until silence, hesitation, and signatures start forming walls around boardrooms where cost-cutting once felt victorious before reality turned. Spreadsheets into liabilities judges read carefully while shareholders calculate losses. Ambition never predicted until settlements arrive, demanding payment heavier than pride survives. Once consequences finish replacing promises nobody trusts anymore. Friday morning arrived carrying the kind of heavy quiet usually found before storms, when wind holds its breath, waiting for something to break across windows left unlatched by people too confident to imagine weather turning against them so quickly. After sunshine felt permanent only yesterday afternoon, I dressed slowly because appearances matter when humiliation shifts into consequence through nothing louder than paper speaking inside courtrooms. Where arrogance forgets judges listen closer than shareholders, pretending everything stays fine until numbers prove otherwise. My phone vibrated twice before breakfast because another client delayed renewal citing leadership instability as unacceptable risk for multi-year agreements worth amounts shareholders count carefully during earnings calls promising growth now. Threatened by silence they cannot explain without admitting mistakes recorded already across emails waiting inside my attorney's folders marked evidence rather than correspondence. Nobody controls once subpoenas appear heavier than boardroom doors. Closing too late, I drove toward her office carrying one box filled with contracts, emails, transcripts, voicemail records, and handwritten notes about meetings canceled, clients worried, and executives pretending control still belonged to them while reality counted. Losses faster than confidence recovered anywhere. Ambition replaced loyalty overnight without exit plans. Surviving first contact with hesitation spreading through customers, partners, and department heads whispering questions. Leadership answered only, with silence too long for comfort. She greeted me calmly because lawyers prefer patience over anger when strategy matters more than emotion spilling words judges ignore. While evidence writes stories, juries believe faster than speeches. Executives deliver after settlements already drain. Accounts shareholders expected funding dividends rather than damages. Courts calculate before signatures end. Arguments ambition. Thought victories permanent until consequences arrived carrying receipts. Nobody expected paying this soon. We organize documents across her table because sequence builds. Wait lawyers measure carefully before drafting letters using phrases like breach, damages, retraction, and immediate resolution. Shareholders read nervously while calculators replace. Applause. Once quarterly reports meet reality heavier than optimism survives after clients delay renewals across contracts. Leadership promised closing before fiscal deadlines now slipping further each week. Silence answers questions reporters will. Start asking once filings become public record headlines, prefer quoting directly without commentary when evidence speaks clearly enough alone. She explained our notice demanded full severance, accelerated stock vesting, public correction regarding termination cause, and damages tied directly to client losses measured from emails, transcripts, and financial reports executives signed themselves before pretending nothing connected decisions made hastily inside boardrooms where ambition mistook confidence for control, collapsing now under hesitation, documented across servers, lawyers subpoena faster than spin recovers reputations. After settlements confirm mistakes, arrogance denied until accounting departments release payments heavier than pride carries publicly. I listened carefully because strategy deserves silence while lawyers arrange words like bricks. Building walls? Opponents cannot climb once judges read clauses. Ambition ignored before signatures turn them into obligations. Courts enforce without. Sympathy toward companies confusing cost-cutting with vision until customers, shareholders, and attorneys align consequences perfectly enough. Removing negotiation choices executives thought belonged entirely to them yesterday before evidence arrived. Today, carrying deadlines nobody escapes once filings reach clerks, stamping dates louder than excuses survive anywhere afterward. By afternoon, the board received our notice because my attorney sent everything directly to their general counsel. Copying shareholders holding enough votes to demand answers faster than executives deliver speeches when panic reaches meetings. Ambition. Once controlled before evidence arrived, carrying signatures heavier than confidence survives. The letter outlined contract violations clearly enough for clerks stamping dates to understand without explanation, listing severance clauses triggered automatically by termination without cause, accelerated stock options owed immediately under Section 14, reputation harm provisions activated by public remarks during my removal, and damages calculated from client delays documented across emails. Executives forwarded themselves accidentally before realizing hesitation spreads faster. Then spin repairs anything after trust disappears publicly. My attorney requested written response within 7 days because deadlines create pressure numbers alone cannot manage once shareholders fear litigation louder than earnings calls. Promising stability already proven false by contracts clients refuse. Signing until settlements confirm leadership understands consequences arrive heavier than pride survives anywhere afterward. Inside that letter, she attached declarations from 3 major clients describing confusion, missed commitments, unanswered questions, and renewal delays beginning immediately after my termination announced without transition planning, consultation, or explanation offered anywhere beyond cost-cutting phrases reporters quote. Before headlines replace marketing slogans, shareholders prefer reading above revenue declines. Nobody predicted publicly until arrogance replaced preparation entirely. She attached internal emails too, the ones department heads sent warning about risks before executives ignored them repeatedly, proving decisions bypassed process requirements written across governance policies auditors now reviewing while lawyers collect timestamps. Judges read carefully before ordering damages calculated directly from mistakes. Defendants admitted accidentally through correspondence. Forgetting discovery rules, place everything under lights, courtroom ceilings hang above. Testimony's ambition never expects delivering until reality removes control completely. When the notice reached them, silence followed longer than shareholders tolerated because markets dislike uncertainty measured across contract delays, lawsuit threats, resignation rumors, and revenue forecasts dropping faster than confidence rebuilds. After settlements confirm liability, nobody escapes once filings become public record reporters read before investors ask questions. Executives hate answering during calls scheduled under pressure heavier than ambition imagines beforehand whenever. Arrogance forgets lawyers arrange consequences slowly until deadlines arrive, suddenly leaving nobody room negotiating anymore afterward. Over the weekend, silence stretched longer than anyone expected because shareholders demanded emergency meetings while clients postponed contracts waiting for resolutions. Leadership could not deliver without admitting mistakes recorded already across emails, transcripts, and financial reports. Attorneys arranged into timelines judges would read eventually when settlements no longer avoided trials. Investors feared worse than temporary revenue losses appearing across spreadsheets. Nobody trusted anymore. Department heads sent messages privately expressing concern about stability, direction, and accountability because employees watched leadership stumble publicly while pretending control remained theirs, even as deadlines slipped. Clients hesitated, and legal notices multiplied faster than confidence recovered anywhere. Ambition once claimed permanent victories collapsing now under pressure heavier than optimism survives alone. My attorney forwarded copies of board responses sounding polite yet empty because phrases like reviewing internally, evaluating concerns, and considering options signal nothing beyond panic. Disguised beneath corporate language everyone recognizes. Whenever lawsuits grow louder than marketing campaigns promising innovation, future quarters cannot deliver once customers delay agreements longer each week. She advised patience because deadlines force decisions faster than arguments when shareholders fear headlines, quoting clauses demanding damages, accelerating daily while investors calculate exposure using numbers. Defendants cannot dispute after signing contracts, transforming promises into obligations. Courts enforce regardless of ambition. Explaining intentions differently after evidence arranges facts chronologically without emotion. Distracting judges reading signatures heavier than pride. Carries before settlements replace denial eventually. By Sunday evening, 2 directors requested private discussion offering compensation quietly before lawsuits proceeded publicly, suggesting severance beyond contractual minimums if I agreed delaying filings until renewal periods passed safely. Protecting quarterly optics leadership valued above reputations already damaged internally beyond recovery. Even with payouts, investors approved reluctantly whenever silence costs less than litigation. Risks shareholders hate funding longer than necessary financially. My attorney prepared counterterms demanding full severance, accelerated stock vesting, public retraction correcting termination cause, legal fees coverage, and damages calculated from client losses, documented precisely enough preventing negotiation. Shortcuts defendants hoped surviving headlines arriving once settlements announced formally through disclosures. Regulators require whenever lawsuits end affecting shareholder interests directly across markets. monitoring everything faster than ambition rebuilds credibility afterward. Anywhere leadership underestimated consequences, appearing this quickly under pressure heavier than confidence repairs. Following mistakes ignored repeatedly beforehand. By Monday morning, negotiations accelerated because shareholders refused extended uncertainty, damaging valuations faster than leadership repaired confidence anywhere. Contracts delayed renewals longer than quarterly reports tolerated before markets reacted publicly against earnings forecasts collapsing already under hesitation. Nobody expected spreading this widely after one termination decision. Executives defended stubbornly until evidence dismantled every explanation slowly. My attorney submitted counterterms demanding full severance owed under Section 14. Accelerated vesting clauses triggered automatically by termination without cause. Damages tied directly to client losses documented across renewal delays. Legal fees coverage preventing settlements draining my compensation unfairly, and written retraction correcting termination reasons circulated internally. Damaging reputation clauses protected explicitly inside contracts. Defendants ignored previously. Directors requested confidentiality provisions limiting publicity after settlements closed, because investors feared headlines quoting damages heavier than budgets absorbed easily without affecting valuations sliding already after customers delayed. Agreements longer than leadership predicted before lawsuits appeared. Carrying clauses courts enforce regardless of corporate spin explaining intentions afterward differently. I insisted on public correction issued formally before payments cleared, because reputations require transparency ambition ignored entirely, while replacing loyalty with cost-cutting slogans collapsing quickly once clients questioned stability. Leadership pretended remained intact, despite evidence contradicting statements shareholders read before demanding resolutions. Ending uncertainty, draining confidence faster than forecasts recovered afterward. My attorney agreed because leverage disappears after settlements close unless reputations restored publicly. Matching damages privately negotiated beyond accounting disclosures investors expect whenever lawsuits finish quietly protecting valuations. Markets watch carefully before reacting permanently against companies mishandling governance failures, damaging trust customers abandon longer than revenue recovers afterward. Directors requested additional time reviewing proposals, but deadlines fixed by notice clauses prevented delays beyond 72 hours before filings proceeded automatically triggering discovery obligations. Lawyers warned exposing internal emails. Shareholders preferred avoiding through settlements cheaper than litigation expenses, multiplying once trials scheduled publicly. By afternoon, leadership accepted financial terms reluctantly while resisting public retraction language. Investors insisted releasing before next earnings call, explaining settlements transparently preventing speculation damaging valuations heavier. Then payouts concluded privately afterward. Under agreements, lawyers finalized quickly once damages calculated precisely eliminating arguments. Defendants risked losing before judges enforcing contracts strictly whenever obligations violated clearly. My attorney prepared draft announcements, balancing legal precision with shareholder optics, requiring signatures across directors, confirming acceptance before payments transferred electronically, closing disputes quietly unless deadlines missed forcing. Filings immediately afterward, leaving defendants vulnerable publicly unnecessarily according to investors demanding closure rapidly now. Got it. I will now write segment 8 in the same first-person confessional style, keeping every sentence between 7 and 12 words. One continuous block, correct punctuation throughout, about 400 to 450 words long. By the time Thursday arrived, pressure inside their building felt unbearable because clients postponed contracts indefinitely. While shareholders demanded explanations, leadership still refused giving beyond phrases sounding temporary even as losses. Deepened faster than confidence recovered anywhere. Ambition once controlled completely before evidence dismantled illusions, gradually using signatures heavier than promises collapsing now. Department heads whispered about resignation rumors spreading across executive floors because directors scheduled closed sessions excluding leadership entirely. For the first time since quarterly reviews began unraveling, optimism defended stubbornly. Until renewal delays exposed risks nobody minimized anymore after lawsuits appeared carrying clauses enforcing obligations. Contracts protected explicitly beyond negotiations. Pride resisted conceding earlier. My attorney delivered supplemental notice attaching additional client statements describing missed deadlines, unanswered communications, and instability influencing procurement decisions postponed indefinitely until governance failures resolved. Publicly satisfying risk committees refusing exposure longer than necessary financially. Whenever leadership mistakes documented thoroughly invite lawsuits, markets punish quickly afterward. We attached financial analyses, projecting revenue declines, accelerating each quarter unless settlements finalized restoring stability, customers required before extending agreements. Leadership jeopardized replacing loyalty with cost-cutting ambition, underestimated disastrously while ignoring warnings. Department heads sent weeks before termination decisions triggered everything unfolding now across headlines. Shareholders dreaded reading next. Directors contacted my attorney privately acknowledging resolutions required immediately preventing further deterioration, damaging valuations already slipping after analysts downgraded outlooks citing contract delays, legal exposure, and executive turnover appearing inevitable unless settlements concluded restoring confidence. Customers, employees, and investors demanded simultaneously before losses exceeded reserves. Budgets allocated covering litigation risks previously considered hypothetical. Scenarios never materializing until arrogance ignored governance protections deliberately. My attorney recommended maintaining pressure through deadlines because negotiations accelerate fastest. When discovery obligations approach forcing disclosures, shareholders avoid whenever settlements cheaper than courtroom testimonies risking. Reputations permanently unlike private agreements limiting publicity carefully afterward. Once damages paid fully according to contractual formulas, defendants failed challenging legally after evidence arranged chronologically removed defenses. Completely beforehand. Thursday evening, board representatives requested draft terms again, signaling willingness accepting compensation, retraction language, confidentiality provisions, and accelerated payments preventing filings triggering automatic discovery obligations. Courts schedule publicly whenever deadlines expire unnecessarily. Exposing mistakes, settlements conclude quietly cheaper, avoiding scrutiny reporters pursue aggressively afterward, damaging valuations longer than litigation expenses directly. My attorney prepared revisions demanding final signatures before 72-hour deadline expired, automatically authorizing filings. Shareholders feared worse than settlements, draining reserves temporarily without affecting earnings permanently. Through headlines, analysts amplify beyond financial pages, damaging reputations, leadership careers rarely surviving afterward. Once courts enforce accountability, replacing negotiations ending quietly otherwise. Friday morning began with silence heavier than anything earlier this week because board members reviewed settlement terms overnight while shareholders demanded closure, preventing lawsuits triggering discovery obligations exposing internal. Communications directors feared reaching reporters before agreements concluded privately, protecting valuations collapsing faster than leadership recovered confidence, anywhere ambition once controlled completely, before evidence dismantled illusions. Steadily, my attorney called confirming supplemental clauses accepted already, including accelerated stock vesting, full severance payments, legal fees coverage, public retraction language, and damages tied directly to client renewals delayed after termination. Decisions documented thoroughly across emails, executives sent accidentally admitting risks ignored repeatedly. Despite warnings department heads circulated earlier demanding caution, leadership dismissed arrogantly beforehand. Deadlines forced signatures before markets opened Monday morning because analysts threatened downgrades citing litigation exposure, executive turnover rumors, revenue delays, and governance failures undermining investor confidence deeper each quarter. Settlements postponed unnecessarily longer than customers tolerated. Instability damaging procurement decisions postponed indefinitely beyond reporting periods. Investors monitored closely, anticipating consequences. Leadership underestimated, disastrously beforehand. Directors requested confidentiality provisions limiting publicity after announcements released, correcting termination narratives publicly because reputations required restoration. Protecting valuations shareholders prioritized above executive careers, rarely surviving governance scandals reaching headlines. Analysts amplify beyond financial pages, damaging companies longer than litigation expenses. Settlements resolve quietly cheaper afterward whenever evidence eliminates defenses quickly before. Trials begin publicly. I insisted on language confirming termination without cause, formally correcting records internally, externally, and contractually, because professional reputation requires transparency ambition. Ignored entirely replacing loyalty with cost-cutting. Slogans collapsing immediately once clients delayed agreements, demanding accountability. Investors supported unanimously after renewal risks exceeded projected litigation expenses. Settlements concluded privately afterward, protecting valuations. Temporarily avoiding discovery obligations, permanently damaging leadership careers continuing anywhere afterward. My attorney emphasized deadlines controlling negotiations because pressure multiplies faster than arguments survive. Approaching filings, forcing disclosures. Defendants avoid desperately once subpoenas scheduled depositions, publicly risking reputations. Shareholders sacrifice executives, protecting valuations, requiring settlements. Preserving confidence markets demand whenever lawsuits threaten forecasts directly beyond quarterly cycles. Analysts report carefully afterward. By afternoon, signatures reached her office electronically confirming acceptance across all terms demanded originally. Because leverage disappears once agreements finalize, restoring stability. Customers, investors, and employees require simultaneously. Before procurement delays, earnings downgrades, and resignation rumors accelerate consequences, permanently damaging valuations, leadership careers collapsing already under scrutiny. Headlines amplify once discovery begins publicly, otherwise unnecessarily afterward. She scheduled payment transfers, retraction publication, and board resolutions approving settlements unanimously. Monday morning, preventing filings automatically triggering depositions. Directors feared worse than compensation costs investors funded, reluctantly avoiding publicity. Damaging markets longer than accounting losses. Reserves recover afterward quietly once agreements conclude permanently. Monday morning arrived, carrying signatures ending months of arrogance collapsing quickly once settlements forced accountability. Nobody avoided after evidence arranged obligations. Carefully judges enforced automatically whenever deadlines expired. Unnecessarily otherwise. Payments transferred electronically before markets opened because investors demanded closure. Preventing litigation risks, triggering discovery obligations. Exposing communications. Directors feared reading publicly damaging valuations permanently beyond. Compensation costs budgets covered reluctantly afterward, quietly. Retraction statements released. Correcting termination records internally and externally, because reputations required restoration. Restoring confidence customers demanded before extending agreements postponed indefinitely following leadership decisions. Documented thoroughly, proving governance failures. Shareholders refused, ignoring longer after earnings forecasts collapsed rapidly beforehand. Employees read announcements silently, understanding transitions inevitable now because directors scheduled leadership changes immediately, protecting valuations. Markets prioritized heavier than executive careers, ending quietly once settlements concluded, permanently removing negotiations afterward. My attorney confirmed compliance across all clauses demanded originally, including damages calculated directly from renewal delays documented carefully beforehand repeatedly. By Tuesday morning, board resolutions passed unanimously approving leadership transitions demanded quietly by shareholders, unwilling risking valuations longer after settlements concluded, publicly correcting termination records formally before markets. Reacted, permanently damaging forecasts already shaken beyond recovery earlier. Executives submitted resignations effective immediately, protecting agreements requiring confidentiality provisions. Investors insisted, preventing additional publicity, damaging reputations, collapsing already under scrutiny heavier than losses budgets. Absorbed, reluctantly covering compensation costs. Settlements demanded automatically once clauses enforced legally afterward. Clients received personal assurances. Stability restored across governance structures redesigned quickly under interim leadership. Appointed carefully by directors, prioritizing confidence recovery investors, employees, and customers required. Simultaneously preventing delays, extending procurement decisions indefinitely, harming revenue projections previously collapsing faster than markets tolerated earlier. My attorney monitored compliance deadlines, confirming payment transfers cleared correctly, retraction language published fully, stock vesting accelerated officially, and damages calculated precisely, distributed electronically according to formulas. Contracts specified originally before disputes escalated unnecessarily under leadership careers, ending suddenly afterward. Employees whispered about transitions unfolding silently because negotiations concluded, completely removing uncertainty dominating offices previously. Whenever lawsuits threatened exposure heavier than ambition, resisted conceding arrogantly before. Evidence dismantled defenses, contracts enforced permanently afterward. By Friday evening, settlements completed formally across every clause demanded carefully protecting contractual rights leadership ignored arrogantly before evidence dismantled defenses. Shareholders abandoned immediately afterward, preventing litigation. Exposure discovery obligations triggered automatically whenever deadlines expired unnecessarily. Compensation payments cleared electronically, covering severance, damages, accelerated vesting, and legal expenses entirely, while retraction statements circulated internally, externally, and contractually, correcting termination records publicly. Restoring reputations ambition destroyed recklessly beforehand. Clients extended agreements under revised leadership structures, guaranteeing governance reforms, preventing decisions bypassing oversight procedures. Investors insisted enforcing permanently through board resolutions adopted unanimously afterward. Directors appointed interim executives, restoring confidence markets demanded urgently before quarterly forecasts finalized. Avoiding downgrades, analysts threatened issuing earlier after renewal delays. Procurement risks extended, instability damaging. Valuations heavily beforehand. Employees returned gradually toward normal operations. Understanding settlements concluded permanently, ending uncertainty dominating offices previously. Whenever lawsuits threatened exposure, headlines amplified publicly, damaging reputations, collapsing. Faster than financial losses, budgets recovered reluctantly afterward. My attorney closed files sequentially, confirming compliance timelines, satisfied completely, preventing disputes, reopening unnecessarily afterward, preserving confidentiality provisions, protecting valuations. Shareholders prioritized heavily beyond. Executive careers ending abruptly under consequences, ambition underestimated permanently beforehand. Don't forget to hit like, subscribe, and turn on the bell so you don't miss the next story. Write in the comments from which city are you watching. Ding, 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 ding.